My mom was out at 2 jobs, and I struggled very deeply emotionally. And so there was physical presence, but both with my mom and my dad, I think it ended there. And so this mother of mine, which felt very distant, I still got the joy and gift and blessing of experiencing motherhood through my Auntie Fanning, who lived with us, and through my grandmother, my Grandma Gibbons. And I got to tell you, both women were like Marian Fatima peace plan prayers. I didn't know that what they were doing at the time. They would just retire after dinner and go to get their big fat prayer books out and get out their rosary beads, and they were doing warfare in the bedroom, and none of us knew it. I also knew that they were the person I felt drawn to when I had a test I needed to pass, and I would always ask them for that prayer. So they were really, really beautiful women in my life, and I think influenced certainly my return via their prayers, their incredible prayers. I don't want to get into the long, sort of drawn-out war story of my dad's addiction. Some of the highlights to give you a sense of just how progressive it became. My dad was one of the most talented and incredibly talented and blessed photographers that I had ever known, but he was also self-employed, which when you're an addict equals unemployed. Because you can take beautiful pictures, but if you don't get them to the person they belong to, you end up with people on your front porch from the Better Business Bureau, which was something that happened on a regular basis. During the time of my dad's addiction and the resentment began to build, we had our phone shut off for 9 months to a year. We had electricity shut off from time to time. We had our house was put up, threats. It never came through. I was very blessed that way, but I would come home with my friend, and this is a funny story. You know, alcoholism has a group of demons assigned to the family. These spirits have very special, particular jobs. One is to make fools of the family. So what do I mean by that? Here we aren't paying our bills on a regular basis, but my parents are depending upon my grandmother and her pension and her income to send us to the most expensive school in the area, because you've got to make things look good. And the other thing too is there was a beautiful motive in my mom's heart in doing that and sending us to this school, and that was that she really believed education would free us from every problem. She knew about God. She didn't know God. Right? She knew about him. So if you don't know God, you don't know how powerful he is and how he frees you from everything. So the place where the altar we worshiped at for a while was just higher education. That was going to fix the problem. At this point, I'll tell you, as a little kid, like in grade school, 1st through 3rd grade, I fell in love with Jesus. I went to Catholic schools, and I fell in love with Jesus, and I really, really dug the whole miracle Jesus. I really liked the healer. He was like, I was all about him. When it got to the whole pick up your cross and follow me, I was like, kind of out on that one. I say it all the time at college retreats. You know, if Jesus had said, pick up your keg and follow me, he'd have a very large following, you know. If he said to me at multiple times in my life, pick up your cake and follow me, I was like, I'm all in, you know. To some, it's pick up your cash. To some, it's pick up your power, your prestige, your whatever, and follow me. And if he asked us any of those things, he'd have the world at his feet. And yet he called us to carry a cross. And part of the journey of every Christian is to find out how sweet that really is. Now, I'm going to fast forward you because I didn't know that Jesus yet. And my whole perception of Jesus based on what I misunderstood was that I had vending machine Jesus mentality, right? You put in your $1 and a quarter and you expect your Snickers to appear. Boom, right? So I would put in my prayers and expect the result to appear. Boom. So I would pray for my father not to die drunk. Get him sober, get him sober, get him sober. And I didn't know that God was saying not yet. I just thought he just wasn't listening, because my life was getting thicker and thicker in pain. And I just thought, like, you are busy in the Middle East. I don't count. And so it was a real misunderstanding. You know, it was like, I put my prayers in, it's time for you to do your end of the task. And I had no understanding that the cross that he would ask me to carry, this experience of addiction in my home, would bless so many people later in my life in a profound way. I will tell you that I read somewhere that the Father keeps a part of your heart, and he keeps a part of your heart in eternity that you might seek after the thing that's missing. It'll leave an ache, it'll leave a longing, it'll leave a desire. And until you go to the Father, you can't have that ache satiated. Well, I went to Brownies and Boys, chocolate chip cookies. None took away the ache. I will tell you that prayer was the antidote, but I was too busy and too noisy for it. And at that time, I will tell you some of the things that I didn't understand were happening with me or why they were happening with me, nor was I willing to hold myself accountable for entering in or participating in the healing necessary. I had a brother, and the brother was brilliant. He Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude at a an Ivy League university. But he opened and shut doors a magic number of times, and he flicked on switches in our house, lights, a magic number of times. And he never said a magic number of times. I knew that after I learned what he had. I would say, what are you doing? I remember thinking, you are so weird, and what are you doing? And this was his broken coping mechanism, right? He's got severe OCD. We didn't call it that. We didn't know. It was way before Adrian Monk came, whom I tenderly love, okay? But it was way before the obsessive-compulsive detective showed up on the scene, so I had an obsessive-compulsive brother, and I had it in my own self, and I didn't know what it was, and I just thought we were weird, right? How did it come out in me? Well, I took like hour-long showers, and it took about 15 minutes to get each tooth clean. And my father, God bless him, I drove him crazy with the water bill. I really, really did. And so that was just a little bit, but also needing things just so, needing things in a certain way. It was total hostage taking emotionally. It was a real bondage for me. And the other thing that came on no short order was pathological lying. And it started out like, oh, no, Megan, I can you give me your phone number in high school? I'm at the richest high school in the area. It was a Jesuit Catholic high school. The tuition was obscene. And I have to explain to this person, we don't have a phone because we're a mess. I was, oh yeah, something, so the phone company's got this issue and this problem they haven't been able to fix. And I believed people would believe that. I mean, I was genuinely mentally ill. I really believed that people wouldn't be like, what is wrong with that woman? She's weird. What is wrong with her? So the pathological lying, like me going into the Jewish Community Center, it's funny, I did not the Catholic Youth Center. I went to the Jewish Community Center to steal showers when our water was shut off, because I worked at one summer camp there and thought, they won't stop me. But one of the unfortunate things when you go through suffering, you have options to choose how you're going to suffer. You can suffer with God, and you can suffer without God. I have a beautiful daughter, Isabella. She has been asked by God to carry a tremendous cross. And this was laid on her shoulders about Velma would remember. It was a painful time, so I'm not good with the timetable, but it was intense. And it plunged my daughter into profound, profound pain and anger at God. And that same beautiful girl who has experienced a cross bigger than I could have imagined in a lifetime knowing, called me up just a few weeks ago and said, Mom, you know something? She decided with our encouragement, I said, don't bring this unhealed wound to college, because there's way too many ways there to medicate it. There will be boys, there will be beer, there will be lots of things. And the fact is, you need to know the profoundness and the mercy and the love of God. So please consider, I ask you, doing a year, which is a gift of self, where you will encounter him over and over and over as a missionary. And she had two sisters who had done a full year of mission work. One had done it with Life Teen and the other with Marian Missionaries of Divine Mercy. So this very courageous daughter decided to do a year of mission with NET, the National Evangelization Team. And a few weeks ago, she called me up and said, Mom, the cross is starting to make sense. I've been doing small group discussions in my retreats with middle schoolers and junior high schoolers. Every time I do a small group, Mom, it's like I get the kid, not anybody else on my team. There's like 12 to 15 on a team. I get the kid who's in the most pain. Recently, it was a kid whose brother just died of suicide. And I said to him, I know loss, not exactly like yours. I know intense pain, not exactly like yours. But I do know suffering. And I have learned that there are two ways to suffer. One is with God, and one is without God. The second is hell. The first is full of hope. You get to decide. And my daughter, at age 19, is bringing hope to the hopeless, precisely because of the sweetness of the cross. At that time, I decided to consider myself instead a victim, and so the pathological lying began, the anger, the rage. I put myself in situations where I wanted love, and I wanted it now, and I wanted it my way, and I also placed myself in danger and ended up, as a consequence, with a serious experience of sexual molestation. And I gotta tell you, the enemy, he sets up voices, and the voices that I was given, in a 12-step healing circle that I belong to, we call it the itty-bitty, not-so-friendly committee. And that committee, they became my friends. They became my companions and my constant source of identity. You're fat. You don't belong here. You're useless. Why, you don't fit in. Like this was my constant companion because I didn't run to the Lord. Because vending machine Jesus had failed me. So I didn't run to the Lord. And I will tell you that I threw myself into the world. I threw myself into, of all things, theater. And as God would have it, it was probably preparation for being in front of a large audience. I always say God uses everything in the economy of salvation. He wastes nothing. And so I got into hanging out in front of large audiences and doing my will. And one of the plays that I was invited to participate in, I said, oh, no, I can't do that. That's a bad play. And no, that's a bad play. And I said no to that play. And then another play came up by the same playwright, who's a very, very broken, wounded, vehemently anti-Catholic playwright. And another play came up by him, and at this time in my life, I had gotten pretty high off of all the applause and being the lead and having praise, men's praise. And so I signed on wholeheartedly to a play called Laughing Wild. And in it, I portray a mentally ill woman who has more clarity and vision than the Lord Jesus. And the mentally ill woman meets up. She pretends to be Sally Jesse Raphael. That was a show host, not unlike, you'd find Ellen doing or Oprah, whatever. And I dress up as Sally Jesse Raphael in this play, and I interview the infant of Prague, who is the infant Jesus. And in my interview with him, the questions I asked him penetrated the church's teaching on, of all things, exactly what Judy just taught: the beauty and the truth of human sexuality and the human person. And when I asked Jesus his opinion on abortion, and he answered with the church's teaching, I struck him. And I continued. And I asked him about the church's teaching on birth control. And he answered. And I hit him again, physically, the man who was playing him. And I asked him about the church's teaching on marriage and homosexuality. And he answered honestly. Wasn't written well, wasn't written truthfully in the fullness of truth, or wasn't written with charity or beauty. But he answered honestly, and I threw him to the ground. And I got on top of him, and I continued to slap and to beat. Lights out, applause by the audience at a Catholic university. You see, my love of St. Paul. St. Paul, when I got to know him, was a huge consolation to my heart. And I think he chased after me more than I him. I hardly knew him when I called upon him. I was asked to speak at a 12-step healing circle anniversary. And I'm not exaggerating. This seems like I'm making things up, right? I'm over my pathological lying stage. I'm not going to tell you that I'm a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person, but these parts of my story, which are incredible, are written by the beautiful God who is so incredible. I was supposed to speak, and I was terrified. It was the first time I was ever going to do any speaking. And I said, okay, who can I call upon? And I was just returning to the church, just returning to my faith, and kind of like in that wonder and awe stage where like everything's so magical and easy and consolations come hither and thither. And I was like, okay, who did a lot of talking in front of big people? Okay, St. Paul and St. Peter, you guys did. So I need your help right now. I really need your help right now. And then I spoke, and it bore some beautiful fruit for people that were present. And I went to daily mass later that day at noon. That was a morning presentation. Later that day, I went to mass at noon. This is before Magnificat. And the priest opens the mass. So today's the feast day of St. Peter and St. Paul. And I slapped my husband. He goes, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I can't believe it's this feast day. And he's like, what is wrong with you? And I had to tell him what was, thank you. Good women, oh my gosh, thank you. And just watch my mascara run. I know you'll forgive me. I'm so grateful. Okay, so yeah, that was like pretty cool. That was St. Paul and St. Peter after me, which was really neat. Now, I'll move on. How did I find this incredible husband who has really been part of my cross and my resurrection? I was working as a waitress, and he was a cook. And I went back to ask for lunch, and there was this brunette, blue-eyed Adonis back there, yeah. I was still guilty of idol worship back then, and I just thought, oh my gosh, whew, okay, I'm gonna make a regular habit of going in that kitchen. And eventually I got the feeling that he liked me back, which was very thrilling. And really funny side story, this one waitress ordered something, and that same man, that cook, said, I'm sorry, we're out of it, It was lunchtime. She's like, I'm sorry, we don't have any more of that. And she went out to the table with something else. I walk in about 15 minutes later, and I said, hi, can I have, not knowing that Moxie had just ordered that, can I have, and I ordered the same item, and he goes, can you give me 10 minutes? Isn't that awesome? When I came out and I sat it down at the waitress table, I had no idea this man liked me, and I sat it down at the waitress table to eat, and Moxie went, where did you get that? And I said, that really beautiful blue-eyed brunette, and she's like, I'm gonna kill him. And she walked into the kitchen, and when she came back out, she goes, okay, I'll let it slide this time because he thinks you're cute. And I was like, yeah! So that's kind of a little love story. But I had to chase him more than he chased me because he was a year sober and just getting to know that he had a purpose. When I met him, he was a year sober from a cocaine addiction, alcohol addiction, addiction to marijuana that almost claimed his life. And I mean very literally almost claimed his life. And when I met him, he was this clean-cut, good-looking, sharp, smart, sober, and I was just like, wow. And this is how we got to know each other. Talk about getting off on the wrong foot. I said, listen, all of the girls and a couple of guys are going out to Andy Gavin's, which is a bar. Tonight, after work, would you like to join us? And he goes, I don't do bars. And I was like, oh. And he said, I don't drink. And I said, well, I don't drink either. And that was a true statement. My dad's alcoholism had left a profound impression on me. And I did not drink, and I was told by a person at a treatment facility who did an evaluation on me at a family education program, you are wise not to drink. Don't ever change that decision. So I said to him, hey, I don't drink either. We could go and sip sodas. And he said, when I go to bars, I drink. And that was the first introduction to somebody who made a very conscious decision to change people, places, and things so that he could pick up his cross and follow God. And he also was the first person I met that really believed God was an intimate, personal, tender relationship that moved mountains, that no human being could. And he was very beautiful to me. I will tell you that the next few years with that man were very, very based in a 12-step healing circle. Both of us belonged to two different ones, but we're finding a relationship with this very beautiful God, Jesus. Predominantly, I was attracted at first to him, then to the Father who opened up, and to the Holy Spirit. All of them today. I cannot live without any of them. But before I got to know them, and before I really turned my life and my will, actually I remember the prayer where I first made a decision to turn my life and my will, having come to believe that God was good, no longer scary, didn't have his thumb hovering over the smite button, like waiting to ha ha ha, you got you now, you sinned again. I really shed that false idea of a God during this time in that recovery program. And I also had to make a decision to turn my life and my will over to him. And that was terrifying to me. I just was so afraid it would cost me more than it would give me. That's how broken my trust was. And I remember getting on the knees and saying, I'm so afraid if I do this, you'll take that man out of my life that I've fallen in love with. He had such good plans for me. And he just kept saying, Megan, please trust me. And I got down on my knees at that facility, and I knelt down. It was more like a retreat. And I said, okay, God, I offer myself to you through Mary to build with me and do with me as you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to all those whom I should help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do your will always. And I walked away with fear and trepidation, but intense peace. During that time, there was not an overnight St. Paul conversion where I realized like the world's teaching about chastity was on board. So we had 4 years of profound unchastity together. And then we had a miracle. And here's our miracle. 4 years of unchastity. My two beautiful ladies in my life died. My auntie and my grandma died in very close proximity. And as a consequence, I was open to this beautiful counselor saying to me, you really should read this book. And she hands me a book on, of course, Mary, right? And the consequence of reading that book was I started praying the rosary. And I went to this woman and I said, can we pray the rosary? And she said, Sunday night, be at my house, 7 o'clock. I had no idea how to do it. My grandmother would have been scandalized. There's another great story, too short a time, but if I can, I'll tell you that. Remind me the Uncle Bill rosary story if I see you. Anyway, what happened was I went, started praying the rosary. She took me to this little church in another area of our state, which was supposedly having apparitions. Whether or not they are true is determined by the church, not by me. I can tell you that whether or not they're true, God brought incredible fruit to my life, and he can bring great good out of everything. He does. So I was at this church. Ironically, it was called St. Joseph's. And who is St. Joseph the patron of? Purity. And I am in St. Joseph's Church at a healing mass, and in the beginning, there's this woman in the front of the church. Cannot see her, but she is actually doing intercessions of healing while the priest is processing through the audience with the Blessed Sacrament in a monstrance. For those of you who don't know what a monstrance is, it's a beautiful, it looks like a great big sun on a gold stem, and you carry it, and there's a window in it, and a consecrated host is placed in that window, so you can be in the actual real presence of Jesus Christ. So the priest is processing through the church, stopping at each pew, and the woman in the front is praying spontaneously prayers of healing. And literally the entire, up until they got to our pew, every intercessory prayer was physical. For all those with autoimmune disorders, and then she would name ones I had never heard. For all those with respiratory disorders, and she would name them. For all those with cancer, and and I'm like, whoa, this girl knows her stuff, like she must be a doctor or pharmacist. They get to my pew, right before my pew, there's Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament. I'm just returning to the church. I may have made a confession, I can't remember. And I'm looking at Jesus, I'm looking him straight in the eye, and I'm like, wow, so you're really supposed to be there, huh? And all of a sudden, the prayer turns to, for all those committing sins against the virtue of chastity, for those engaging in fornication, masturbation, pornography. She goes through this whole list, and I was like, what? Now, we went because my boyfriend had an autoimmune disorder, and they didn't know what it was, and he was so ill. I'm like, wait a minute, So I'm like completely confused. I'm trying to take it in. My heart is burning within me, like the guys on Emmaus. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I turned to my boyfriend with whom I am fornicating, and I said, well, what's fornication mean? And he says, I have no idea. And I'm like, is she talking about us? And he says, very protective of his stash, oh, I don't think so. No, okay. I can tell you that I literally, the two-hour ride back home, the Lord, the Eucharistic Jesus, had called me by name. Called me by name, and I couldn't shake it. And I tried for 2 hours in a car sitting next to my boyfriend who was planning on fornicating with me when we got home. Instead, he was met with this conversation. Here's a funny thing. I didn't know what the catechism was, and I certainly didn't own one, right? But I did have a hardcover Webster's Dictionary, and I remember running to it when he was in the bathroom, and I looked up fornication. I didn't know if I'd find it in the PHs or the Fs. I was so confused. It's in the F's, in case you're wondering. So, so I said to him, Neil, I got to tell you something. I don't expect this conversation to make any sense because we had broken up for a year, and during that year I had learned one thing. During that year I had learned that good men knew God. Good men believed in God and trusted him and prayed to him. Good men had a prayer life. And during that year, my counselor and my sponsor said, don't date, because she knew how broken and weak I was. Don't date, don't kiss anybody's face. And I'm like, well, they're attractive if they like me and I like them. She's like, Megan, listen to me, you're on the rebound. Just keep the romance, keep it out of that entire area and get to know their heart and get to know their mind and get to know their character, because this could be the future father of your children, and this is something you shouldn't take lightly. And sex gets in the way. Now, that was her way of preaching her Catholic faith, which she was very devoutly in, but she did it without letting me know that she was preaching the Catholic faith. And during that year, because I didn't kiss anyone's face, and I got to know what a good man I had given up. And I got to know that I was a better person when I was with him. The difference being God. So I went back to him and I said, Neil Murphy, I don't expect this to make any sense to you, but I got to keep my clothes on until marriage. And I don't expect that you necessarily want to do the same thing. So the future of this relationship, even though we just got back together, is really in your hands right now. You get to decide what you want. I know that I want you in my life. I know that you are one of God's greatest blessings and gifts to me, but I also know that I need to keep my clothes on until marriage. I don't even know why. So it's up to you. What's it going to be? And he looked down, and he looked almost as if he was saying a prayer, and he looked back up to me, and he said, Megan Barrett. I wasn't yet Murphy. Megan Barrett. You're worth waiting for. I got to tell you, the floodgates open, and I started to sob uncontrollably. He's like, what? What did I say? What did I say? What did I do wrong? What did I say? I was like, no. And I'm doing that snotty cry, and I'm like sobbing, and it's a mess. And you just said that you loved me, hyperventilating. And he said, I've been saying that for 4 years. And I said, but this time you really mean it. See, without anybody picking up open a catechism, I knew that self-sacrificial love, what he was signing on to, was the real deal. And when we had the reading at Mass at our marriage read to us that said, as its first description, 1 Corinthians 13, the first description of love is patient. And the word patience in the Greek, when you go back and translate it, the word patience means long-suffering. Long-suffering. Isn't our God so long-suffering? Isn't he so good? He's just so good. And so this long-suffering God and this long-suffering man, we wed in 1995. We were blessed to be given 4 beautiful daughters. I tell him all the time he's blessed among women, and a son on the other side. And I have to tell you that with all those 4 beautiful daughters came significant crosses in our lives, significant crosses, which today, and only because of the gift of pondering prayer, adoration, daily Mass, reception of Eucharist, and constant confession, can we say we can find the sweetness in the cross. It's not always when it first gets laid on us. Oh no, there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. And I say that because I'm not unique in my struggle with suffering. I think it's part of the human condition. St. Faustina said to Jesus, he said, I see 3 multitudes. 3 multitudes. And one is allowing themselves to be nailed to the cross. And the second, they stand with their cross firmly in their hands. And the third, drag their cross behind them, complaining. And I was really indicted when I read that. And I'm indicted from time to time by it again. And I think there have been times when I have fit into all three multitudes. But I hope when I cross the finish line, I'm steadfastly nailed to that cross. St. Peter Julian Amard, who's become a friend of mine because of his love of the Eucharistic Lord, he wasn't always a saint, a go-to saint for me, but he has become a great saint to me. He said this: devotion that has not a tent on Calvary and one near the tabernacle will not result in solid piety and will never accomplish anything great. Wow. A tent on Calvary, the cross, and one near the tabernacle, the Eucharist. Calvary is sort of guaranteed if you're a baptized Christian. But the Eucharist is something, and I will say this. I have pondered a great deal on seek and you shall find. I kept saying, Jesus, why didn't you say, seek me and you shall find me? And he's like, think deeper. Because it's true, whatever we seek, we find. If we seek what is wrong with our mother, our father, the cross, our daughter, our neighbor, our country, our politics, if we seek what is wrong, we will most certainly find what is wrong. If we seek the glory, if we seek healing, if we seek truth and beauty and goodness, we will most certainly find that. Not only in ourselves, but in our neighbor and in the church, and we can find it in the world. So the seeking I started, in my marriage early on to do a lot of seeking, and it brought me to adoration, daily mass, thorough house cleaning through confession. I'll talk more about that in the next talk. But Mother Teresa of Calcutta has a couple of things to say that I think really hit me. The time you spend with Jesus in the most blessed sacrament is the best time you'll spend on earth. Each moment that you spend with Jesus will deepen your union with him and make your soul everlastingly more glorious and beautiful in heaven, and will help bring about everlasting peace on earth. Wow. This is what John Paul had to say: the best and surest and most effective way of establishing peace on the face of the earth is through the great power of perpetual adoration of the most blessed Eucharist. And Teresa of Calcutta said again, Eucharistic adoration with exposition needs a great push. People ask me, what will convert America and save the world? My answer is prayer. What we need is for every parish to come before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament in holy hours of prayer. Be a holy pain in the neck to your pastor. The world is lacking peace, and you have the key. And you need to open his heart to saying yes to that incredible grace and gift. I can also say, quick story. And how am I doing on time? Yeah. Okay, good. I was hoping for that. The OCD, the pathological lying, the negativity, the rage, the anger. I'm a work in progress. But everybody who knew me then, who knows me now, is awestruck at God's power. Not at me, at God's power for healing. Awestruck. I could give you the nitty-gritty details of all of that, and none of that, all that war storytelling isn't nearly as amazing at what God can do. Here's a little story of healing for you. A couple of Lents ago, on the Feast of St. Joseph, I got a call from my doctor, and he said, Megan, I am sitting here. He had sent me for a test. He said, I'm sitting here with 2 other physicians, and I am very, very sorry to report to you that we have found and I've really consulted with them, we found a very large mass on your pancreas. And I was sitting at the table with my daughters who are young still, and I was just plunged into Gethsemane. And it was Lent, it was a proper place to be. And for the next 5 days, I literally threw myself into prayer. And I pray every day, and I take prayer very seriously. But I tell you what, where there was a weeping icon, you could find me. Where there was a rosary being said, you found me. Where, the Friday where they were going to redo the MRI and they were going to see me. I went to a healing mass with the exorcist in our diocese who gave me anointing of the sick. And prior to those sacraments, I had gotten the junk out of my trunk in confession. And then I spent the day in adoration, stations, and by 7:30 at night, when it was literally, my husband turned to me, and it was the eve of Our Lady's feast day, and he said, "What do you want to do now?" And I said, "I can't do any more prayer." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I'm all prayed out." Like, I know that sounds crazy, but if I think any more about me or my pancreas, I am going to explode. I need to do something mindless and stupid. And so he said, "Well, the movies are always mindless and stupid, and I think we'll never be disappointed by how stupid mindless they are." We're very careful about what we pick. We never go to movies that would not glorify, in some way, bring us. And we try not to anyway. We try not to. We're a work in progress. But this particular one was dumber than, it was dumber. It was Kong Skull Island, and it was because it was the only one that didn't have any nudity, sex, like whatever. So here we show up, and I said, I can't believe I'm spending money on a ticket to this movie. I don't even want to see this. But I can't think about myself. And during that movie, I came out of, halfway through the movie, the phone vibrates, and I go running out. And you want to know something? Our Lady, I have to say this, Our Lady of Fatima statue that travels through our area, I was not signed up to receive her at that time. I had received her. And that literally that Wednesday, the diagnosis came on a Monday. That Wednesday I got a call and they said, "Listen, the woman who was supposed to take Our Lady of Fatima, she's had to cancel on us. She's in the hospital. You wouldn't happen to want her, would you?" I'm like, "What?" And this is what I had said to Our Lady of Fatima when she showed up at the house. I'm like, "I don't know how I feel about your being here. You are either here to console me in my bad news that's forthcoming on Friday, or you're here to do a major healing. I'm really hoping it's that." But I was honest with her. I'm like, "I'm scared." And I clung to her, and I clung to her son, the divine physician, the great healer. And that evening when my phone vibrated and I ran out, my husband's running out behind me. I'm sitting on a bench outside in Cinemark. And he said, "Megan, I'm here with the other two physicians. I'm consulting them again. I don't know what to tell you. We simply cannot explain the discrepancy between the two tests." I bawled. I began to bawl. Christ is still healing everyone. God is still healing. What is needed, I was told, is trust. What is needed is trust. And that's the invitation today. Bring your trust with you for your desire to heal. Bring that with you. And I will say, everybody coming out of the other movie, when we're sitting on the bench bawling together, weeping, holding each other in each other's arms, they're like, "What did they see?" I'll close with this meditation. And I didn't write it. My life is but a weaving between my God and me. I do not choose the colors, but he worketh steadily. Oft times in sorrow, sometimes foolish pride. I forget he sees the top, while I the underside. Not till the loom is silent and the shuttle cease to fly will God unroll the canvas and explain the reasons why. But the dark threads are as needful in a skillful weaver's hand as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern God has planned. God bless you.